Bienvenidos y bienvenidas. Herzlich willkommen in the name of the KIT Alumni Club Argentina. Welcome to the KIT virtual Coronactivity. Today we are honored with the presence of Professor Dr. F.Schultmann and Tobías Zimmer, who will give a presentation called Electricity, Heat for Biofuels, a perspective on the future role of bioenergy in Chile. Bioenergy accounts for more than 20% of Chile's primary energy supply, mainly in the form of combined heat and power and firewood for residential heating. With an increasing share of wind and coal power, the role of biomass is expected to change substantially. We will give a brief overview of current developments in the Chilean energy system and present an outlook of the future use of biomass in Chile. Professor Dr. F.Schultmann is chair professor at the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology in Germany and director of KIT's Institute for Industrial Production and the KIT's French-German Initiative for Environmental Research. Professor Schultmann studied business and industrial engineering at the University of Karlsruhe. He completed his doctoral thesis in 1998 at the Faculty of Economics and Management, and in his habilitation in 2003, receiving the Venia Legendi teaching authority in management service. Prior to his present positions, he was a professor of industrial management at the University of the chair of business administration, construction and management and economics at the University of Siegen. Professor Schultmann has been working closely with Chilean partners for more than 10 years, particularly with the University of Concepción and the Universidad de Chile. In this context, he has successfully led several Chilean German projects focusing in biorefineries and the bioeconomy in Chile. And Tobías Zimmer is research associate and PhD candidate at the Institute for Industrial Production at KIT. He graduated in 2015 with an MSc in Industrial Engineering and a focus on logistics and supply chain management. His doctoral thesis examines the deployment of mobile facilities to flexibly produce biofuels from agricultural and forest residues in Chile. He has collaborated actively with researchers at the Universities of Concepción and Valdivia in the field of bioenergy. He is interested in the techno-economic assessment of new conversion processes and the multi-criteria analysis and value chains with regard to economic, ecological, and social impacts. Without further presentation, some of us already know Professor Schultmann, please welcome.
Can I just say a few words of thanks first? We are very honored that Charla is organizing this, and I see for whatever reason, all the presentations have been over Chile. So we are very happy on that. We feel very honored to have the KIT concentrated in our country, and the part of energy, of course, is fundamental for all society, for us as persons too, because without any energy, we can't even speak or think. So it's fundamental. And what we will hear today, I hope, will be an input for what we do in this country, because it's not easy. We have a tremendous problem between energy and environment. And what we are talking about now is the burning of wood, which we have a major problem in Chile with that, just to have you in the context. Of course, it's a carbon neutral, but it has, because it's used as not dry wood, but humid wood, we have from the 10 cities, most contaminated city in Latin America, we are honored to have 9. So we are the champions in contamination. And that is a major problem. And we got a problem even further right now, because just last week, the government or the Ministry of Energy is saying, well, what we have to do is simply electrify everything. So we will change our electricity prices and we will exchange wood. We go out of the wood and we will put electricity. Sounds great, but 40% of the electricity in this country is made by coal, by carbon. So it's very dirty electricity, what we have today. And the other problem, I hope to hear about that, is that the wood industry is very fragmented, little companies, and electricity is, of course, the big companies. So we have a political trouble there too. So I'm very happy to hear the presentations. Thank you.
So I think it's up to our part now. Buenos dias, guten Tag, a very warm welcome from Karlsruhe and warm greetings from KIT. We're in the middle of the summer, so really warm greetings, but feel all welcome, please. Martin, thank you very much for the introduction, and I hope that you are all well. And as introduced, we will give a brief talk on the energy system in Chile, and in particular on the current and future role of biomass and energy. And when I say we will give a talk, that means we will do it in a kind of a tandem mode. I will present the first part, and the second part will be taken by Tobías. And furthermore, Dr. Simon Glöser will join us, and he will be able also to join the discussion and questions afterwards. So Tobías, I hope we can see the slides now. And I will first try to give you a little bit of an introduction into the institute. So the Institute of Industrial Production consists of about 60 people. So we are a huge group at KIT, and the institute consists of, on the next slide, you might be able to see that it consists of 2 chairs. That is myself, and that is the chair of energy economics, Wolf Fichtner, who is also a KIT professor and also a KIT alumni as myself. We have both several research groups at our chairs. At my chair, we have 3 groups. One is dealing with sustainability and the built environment and infrastructure. The other one, where also Tobías is nested in, is dealing with sustainable value chains. And the third research group tackles all topics of risk management and resilient systems. While at the chair of Wolf Fichtner, there are also 3 research groups. One is dealing with transport and energy. The other one is dealing with energy markets and energy system analysis, and the third one is dealing with distributed energy systems and networks. So energy is a very important topic at KIT, and that's also one of the reasons why we're talking about energy today. At the bottom of the slide, you see we have a second institute that is a binational institute, a French-German institute for environmental research, where we do a lot of research on all kinds of environmental issues like the different media, soil, air, water, waste. And we do this with French partners, but also on an international scale. When we just dig a few minutes or a few seconds into the research group on sustainable value chains, then you hopefully see on this slide a bit of an overview of this group. And what you can see here from this picture or this figure is that we try to tackle the whole way of a value chain. So beginning from raw materials extraction, following the different production and logistics steps up to the use of products and the customers. And we also tackle issues like closing loops, like circular economy. And you see on the top of this figures that we do it under different angles. So we also try to assess the technical issues, but also economic and ecological issues, but also societies and political frameworks. We do this not only in our offices at KIT, but we work with a lot of partners. So we get also external fundings from ministries like the BMBF in Germany or the Ministry of Economic Affairs, also European Unions or the Deutsche Forschungsgemeinschaft, the German National Agency, or also some industry cooperations. And the research topics, what you can see here on the slides at the bottom, it is mainly devoted to material and energy flow oriented planning and control of industrial operations. So we always try to tackle the underlying material and energy, the physical flows. And then we try to analyze and assess the processes within such a supply chain or value chain. And this under different angles, again, under economic, ecological aspects, but also regarding political frameworks. And from a methodological point of view, we tackle both quantitative and qualitative issues, mainly quantitative approaches where we try to modelize and optimize systems, and we use methods from business administration, operations research, engineering, and also national and environmental sciences. And this reflects somehow why we have a very interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary team. Now, our current applications are metal production, bioeconomy, what we will talk later on in this presentation, and also resource efficiency. So when we go on and try to look at a slide on circular economy, then you see here a very sophisticated figure, and I don't want to go into all of the details, but what you can see at the very right-hand angle is circular economy. So we try to develop systems that allow really a circular economy. So closing supply chains, like introducing additional functions like reverse logistics, like bringing materials and products back into the production cycle. And on the right hand side, you see that we also tackle issues like environmental management and resource efficiency. And with current application fields on the left side in this figure, you see bioeconomy. And as I said, we also have other fields like metals production, but we always try to get a very comprehensive, a very broad view. So on the left-hand side, you see here circular economy in a broader sense. So again, the material and energy flows as the basic, but then to develop closed-loop supply chains of essential raw materials. And also to this very fundamental issues, there are some related topics like environmental management, emission reduction measures, or the topic of resource efficiency, but also some non-technical issues like corporate social responsibility. How should companies act in a social responsibility matter? And also these kind of high topic topics like digitalization, industry 4.0, and this in connection with assessing the sustainability of industrial operations. So that's a little bit how we try to tackle these issues and how it's our way to go on with these issues and to do research on it. This all on the next slide you can see is embedded, or it's linked to YECO, and Andreas Braun, I think 2 weeks ago, he has made a talk and introduced YECO, and YECO is a virtual institute on industrial ecology, and we concentrate on 4 different topics there. And the research of IIP, of our institute, in particular with circular economy, that has a very strong link to all of the topics that YECO is dealing with. And in particular on this bioeconomy and biomass issue, our research here, in particular in Latin America, is based on previous projects and sustained cooperation, in particular with Chilean partners, but also with other international partners in the area of biomass and bioenergy. So this topic 2, transformation of biomass and sustainable material and energy transformation, We closely work, for instance, with Alex Berg, who is embedded in this YECO organization as a topic speaker together with me. And there we try to have a look at different aspects of biomass utilization and transformation. Some of this will be introduced in a few minutes by Tobías. And we focus on a transition to a bioeconomy by reorganization of productive and logistics systems in the agro-industry. And we try to generate biofuels from the waste of the forest industrial processes. So we try to use materials that are not used elsewhere as a means to increase economic and environmental efficiency. So let's come a little bit more to our cooperation with Chilean partners. We have there two core partners, that is the Universidad Austral de Chile and the UDT. So one is in Valdivia and one is in Concepción. We are working with a lot of different other people there, but that are our core partners. And the research we focused on during the last years was, first of all, a kind of knowledge and technology transfer, exchanging information and regarding the use and conversion of biomass. We also established a joint research group for energy system analysis. We do this not only by phone and video calls and by exchanging papers, but also by exchanging people. So exchange of PhD candidates, master students. And from a methodological point of view, we develop decision support systems for the sustainable use of biomass residues. To make this a little bit more into action, or to show what we have done, we have a lot of cooperation with Chilean partners, and that dates back more than 10 years, what you can see on this slide. So we have some really major research projects since 2007, and I don't want to read them all, but one of the last project that is also a little bit linked to what we show today is the project you see here from 2015 to 2019, this semi-mobile bioenergy from agricultural and forest residues in Chile and beyond, the so-called SEMO bioenergy project, where we worked very closely together and where we also had some technology transfer and implemented some mobile technology or semi-mobile technologies in Chile. We also did some Chilean-German workshops, and again, I don't want to read them all, but what you can see here from the list, we did it in not only in Germany, but the majority of the workshops took place in Chile. So when we talk a little bit more about bioeconomy and sustainable value chains, on this slide you see here a value chain approach to the bioeconomy. And well, our approach is to study bioeconomy from a value chain perspective and to provide comprehensive assessment of the entire value chain. So really from covering all steps, and you can see at the bottom in this figure in the middle, really from cultivation and from harvesting processes to the utilization of these materials. And what we try to do, we try to pay attention to the sustainability of a value chain. And what does sustainability mean? I mean, you always have these multi-pillar view, and we try to include technical aspects, but also environmental and social impacts. So what you see here in the figure of in the top range of the figure, we try to see also social, political and cultural environments. So for instance, we made some investigations, what you see on the left-hand side, about acceptance of energy projects. How can we raise acceptance for new technologies and for new ways of generating and using energy? On the other hand side, on the technical side, you see an example and some pictures on the right-hand side. We did implement a mobile and flexible production for the conversion of biomass. And also on the bottom side of the figure, you see here the techno-economic environment. So we really try again to tackle a value chain from the very first beginning, from the raw materials to the use and the reuse and the recycling of products under different angles: technical, economic, ecologic, and also some society social objectives. So a very broad approach. And well, I think to give you now some more examples and some insights of our current research, I will hand over to Tobías to present the remaining part of this short presentation. Tobías, please.
Okay, thank you very much. Also, thank you very much for this opportunity. And so I'm going to talk now a little bit about bioenergy in Chile and what I think what might happen in the future. And first of all, what types of bioenergy or what types of biomass are available in Chile for the production of energy in general. You can see different types of feedstock in this slide. And in general, the biomass that would be available is lignocellulose, so something like wood or straw, a lot of sawmill byproducts, for instance. And this is a difference, for instance, to Brazil. In Brazil, there are a lot of sugarcane plantations, and therefore Brazil also has a large bioethanol sector. And in contrast, Chile, also because Chile also has very limited agricultural areas. You can see in this map that agriculture only accounts for like 1% of the total area. It does not make too much sense to have dedicated energy crops like in the United States or in Germany, where we have a lot of corn for energy and also for biofuels. So in Chile, we are more talking about like efficiently using residues or byproducts from the forest industry, but also from the agricultural sector. And the most important thing, maybe it's the most important thing from this presentation to take away, is that there is a huge difference between native forests and plantations. In this diagram on the left-hand side, you can see in green the native forests of Chile, and in orange, the forest plantations. So these plantations, these are not native species, but species like eucalyptus or pine, and these are not native to Chile, but for instance, eucalyptus is originally from New Zealand. And you can see that, for instance, in this region, number 8, Biobío, this region is very dominated by commercial forestry. And this is a very efficient and also export-oriented forestry sector, and it produces also a lot of byproducts. And this would be one type of feedstock available for bioenergy. And then we have the native forests, and these native forests right now, they play a minor role in commercial forestry, but they are used to a huge extent to produce firewood for residential heating. And so we have two types of feedstock or biomass that are currently used. And let's have a look at how important each of these types is. First, electricity. In this slide, you can see here the electricity generation in Chile in the last years. And in green, you can see biomass. And what you can see is that biomass only accounts for like 5% of the total electricity generation. So this is not too much, but you have to keep in mind that these 5%, they account for roughly more, maybe 50 to 60% of all the byproducts that are generated by the forestry sector. So even though this is not a huge percentage of the total electricity generation, it indicates that Chile already utilizes biomass and also residues from the forestry industry very well, efficiently, and to a high extent. And then if we look at the primary energy supply, here we have a very different picture, because here we can see that biomass is even more important than natural gas. And the difference here is primary energy supply. This also comprises heating and fuels like gasoline or diesel. And this is where this difference comes from, because this huge difference mainly comes from firewood and from residential heating. In southern areas, more than 90% of the people still use firewood as a primary source of energy. And as Mr. Platt already explained, this comes with a lot of problems. One is particulate matter pollution in the cities. Another problem is degradation of forests, because a lot of this firewood comes from illegal logging. It's also marketed on a black market. So it's not certified, and it comes with a lot of environmental problems. And what we can see here, that in terms of volume, the firewood market is much more important than the electricity sector. Okay, so we have, now I see that the meeting would end in 10 minutes. What are we going to do with?
Hello? Okay.
Hello, yeah. I
can connect again to the same link. We can talk about the questions and share some ideas later.
Okay. So if this will end, then we will just reconnect. Okay. Okay, perfect. Now we have these types of bioenergy. And now what is going to happen if we have more renewables in the future in the energy system? You have probably seen this chart before. This is the global solar potentials and also the solar potentials in Chile. And what you can see is that the solar potentials in Chile, they are among the best in the world. And you can also see that there is a very specific regional distribution. You can see that all the good solar potentials are in the northern regions. And Chile used to have two different or separated electricity systems, one in the north and one in the south. And in 2017, they connected both systems, and that made it possible to balance solar power from the northern regions with the hydropower in the more southern regions. And this created very favorable conditions for an energy transition and also for investments in renewable energies. And you can see this here. You can see here the development from 2010 to 2018. And you can also see that historically, the Chilean energy system has been dominated by coal, gas, and hydropower. And in recent years, there has been an increase in wind and solar. And how is this development going to continue? There are, of course, a lot of different scenarios or speculations about what might happen in the next years. And you can also find a lot of studies and reports. And I'm going to just show you a very optimistic one. This is coming from a large Chilean project where they analyzed potential scenarios for the development until 2050. And what you can see in this diagram here is that we will see a lot more wind, a lot more solar photovoltaics, and also concentrated solar power. Concentrated solar power is one technology that would make a very specific difference for Chile, because this is one technology which only makes sense in specific locations. And one of these locations worldwide is the Atacama Desert in Chile, which has high levels of direct irradiation. And the good thing about concentrated solar power is that it provides up to several hours of energy storage. For instance, this project here is able to store energy up to 17 hours. And this is very good in combination with hydro reservoirs, which practically solves the problem of energy storage. The uncertainty about this technology is that, for instance, this scenario here on the left-hand side, with a high share of solar, of concentrated solar power, is based on cost projections, which yet have to materialize. So you can see here in this diagram, the development of costs for photovoltaics. And you can see that the big reductions have been in the past. In contrast, for solar CSP, the main share of the cost reductions has yet to come. And this, of course, is an uncertainty. But for instance, this is the carbon neutrality plan of Chile, and what you can see is that the government put exactly this CSP project directly on the cover, and they are also basing their carbon neutrality plan on exactly this scenario with a high share of solar CSP. So the Chilean government, they believe in this. So I'm also assuming that this would come true, and we will see what might happen to bioenergy or biomass if that would actually be the case. Now, we had seen that we have different types of feedstock. We have native forests, we have forest plantations, and agricultural residues. And something, we need to keep in mind that these are different markets, that firewood mainly is used for residential heating, and that these byproducts, they are mainly used for CHP. And now first, I would like to briefly talk about what might happen to CHP. So to the combined production of heat and power. Because this talk is called the future role of bioenergy. And if you look for the future role of bioenergy, if you go to the literature, if you look for publications on this topic, most of it will refer to the future production of electricity from biomass. And what you will often hear is that biomass, in fact, would be very expensive, but it could play a role if it would be flexible, if it would provide flexible electricity to balance intermittent renewable energies like solar or wind. And I'm going to argue now that this is not the case for Chile. And before, I would like to briefly show you where this is coming from. This is coming from countries like Germany. In Germany, we have over 9,000 biogas plants. And this number has grown rapidly between 2004 and 2014, because during this period, we had very high feed-in tariffs, so subsidies, incentives for these plants. So the number of biogas plants increased rapidly during this period. And now, after or since these feed-in tariffs have been abolished, there are very few business cases for new biogas plants. In fact, there are many plants which are dropping out of this feed-in tariff scheme, which now have the problem that they would actually have to close down. And in order to preserve those plants and also the employment, the jobs they generate, a lot of people in Germany right now are thinking about how to find a new role for biogas. And for instance, you can see here this book. It is written by Daniela Trähn. She is the director of the National Biomass Research Center in Germany. And essentially what you can find in this book are concepts to make biogas plants more flexible so that they produce residual load, flexible residual load, instead of base load. And in Chile, the situation is somewhat different. The first difference is that in Chile, instead of 9,000 small biogas plants, there are like 25 larger combined heat and power plants, which are more or less integrated in the forest industry. You can see on the one side that these are large plants. For instance, this is one, which is in the south. And you can see this is roughly the catchment area where it gets its feedstock from. And this is very large. And what you can also see here, for instance, for this facility, it has an installed capacity of 40 megawatts, but it provides only 8 to the electricity grid. And the reason for that is that the main share of the electricity is used by the industry, so sawmill, paper mill itself. And this is a very efficient way to use low quality biomass feedstock. Another difference, of course, is that Chile does not pay any subsidies to biomass or bioenergy. And another difference is that in addition to solar CSP, which can provide storage, Chile also has reservoir hydropower. So this means that Chile has 2 technologies which are very useful for balancing intermittent renewables. This means that Chile does not have the same problem of storage as Germany does, which means that in Chile, nobody is really asking for more flexible biomass. So this is why I already have shown you this diagram from a Chilean scenario project. And what you can see here, that the output from the bioelectricity sector will more or less stay the same. So there are no major changes expected for large facilities providing electricity from biomass. And also, I think that there might be additional business cases for combined heat and power from biomass for small and medium-sized companies. For instance, this is a very interesting report, which is exactly about decentral generation of heat and power for self-consumption. So for small businesses like bakeries or public swimming pools. And in this part, there is also no real conflict between other renewables, for instance, solar power. It's very well possible, for instance, to have solar panels on the roof and then a biomass boiler in the basement. This can be
Hello? We are going to connect again to the same link.
Okay.
Please? Okay.
Yeah, I was just talking about bioenergy carriers. And one type of bioenergy carriers are pellets or torrefied pellets, which just give the biomass a little bit more heating value and also more value in monetary terms. And you can use these bioenergy carriers to replace fossil fuels in existing systems, for instance, in boilers or in coal-fired power plants. And regarding the heating, residential heating, this part of the energy system, I think that in the intermediate future, the most important thing that should happen is not something technical or not a technological option, but the certification of firewood. This is something which comes more from the south of Chile. As Mr. Platt already indicated, in the capital, a lot of people favor more like forbidding the use of biomass or firewood for residential heating altogether. For instance, in Santiago, this is already the case, but this option is not, it does not really meet the reality of many people in the southern regions, which also see firewood as part of their culture. And also, for instance, many farmers, they will use the firewood market as a side activity, economic side activity, or an additional source of income. So in these regions, I think what should happen is to promote this type of firewood certification, which is already happening, but the share of firewood that is actually certified is still low, but it is increasing. And I think that's a good thing. And I think that's more important than, for instance, upgrading the feedstock for instance, using pellets or for implementing district heating. Okay, and this column, intermediate future, I had called it intermediate future because this refers to intermediate solutions, because in the long term, there should be no coal-fired power plants left in Chile, and in the very long run, there will probably only electrified solutions for heating, like heat pumps. So from 2050 on, probably there will only be a very limited share of firewood. So now we can have a look at the long-term future, and something that is very interesting as an option for Chile is that biomass or biofuels and also biochemicals, they work very well with hydrogen. And I'm not going to repeat what Mr. Platt already told you last week, but in summary, there are very good plans for creating something like a hydrogen economy in Chile. And this available of hydrogen is a very, very interesting case to improve the production of biochemicals and biofuels. Because if you produce biofuels through the process of gasification, you first produce a synthesis gas, and this gas consists of carbon monoxide and hydrogen. And then you can create, for instance, methanol, but also ammonia or different biofuels. And the problem is that usually you have a lack of hydrogen, and you can drastically improve the efficiency of this process if you had more hydrogen. And also you can use hydrogen to recycle carbon dioxide from this process, and also thereby increase the share of carbon monoxide. So in the end, you can produce a lot of biofuels more efficiently if you had affordable hydrogen, and that might be the case in Chile in the future. And then, to come to an end, because you can of course argue or make a very compelling case that a lot of feedstock for instance, firewood or many types of wood are actually too valuable to be used only for energy. And this is of course true for many types of high quality wood. And therefore, the last part is that of course, in the future of bioenergy, a lot of what is currently used for energy will be used for material uses like materials, bioplastics, like what you can see in this slide. This is an example from Chile, from UDT. As you have seen, we have worked with them in the past, and you can learn more about these types of containers, which are made from plastics and biomass, but also only from biomass, and they are already commercially available. They do not have a huge market share, but you can already buy bioplastics like that in a supermarket. And of course, you can expect that a lot of feedstock right now used for energy will be used in the future for products like that. And so to come to an end, we have seen that biomass in Chile is mainly lignocellulosic biomass, wood, straw, byproducts from the forestry sector. And what I wanted to argue and convince you of, that in contrast to many countries like Germany, there is no real conflict between biomass in Chile and the other renewables. Because what is happening in the forestry sector, using the feedstock for providing electricity and heat to the production processes themselves, for instance, a sawmill or a cellulose plant. This is very efficient, and this is probably not going to change during the next years. And for the heating, the residential heating and the firewood sector, in this case, a very optimistic scenario with a high share of solar power and very low cost concentrated solar power would actually be a very good thing for the bioeconomy. Because let's imagine that there would be very affordable concentrated solar power. This would mean that there would be affordable electricity also during the night or in the evening. And that would mean that you could replace a lot more firewood with electricity, with electric heating. And this would actually make a lot of feedstock, which is now used for heating, available for something like biochemicals or biofuels or bioplastics. Because right now, many people are using firewood because it is an affordable source and a very low-cost energy carrier. And right now, if you would, for instance, want to produce a lot of bioplastics and you would want to buy a lot of firewood, you would have to compete with people who rely on this type of energy carrier. And that would just create a trade-off relationship between economic and social aspects. Therefore, I think that the use of biomass in Chile would profit a lot from those very optimistic scenarios for the transition of the energy system in general. So, and this is the end of the presentation. I don't know if Professor Schultmann wants to make another remark. Otherwise, I'm just saying again, thank you very much for giving us this presentation. And of course, I'm very happy to answer all your questions.
Thank you very much, Tobías. Nothing really to add, also from my side. I hope it was interesting, and thank you very much. It was a pleasure to have the opportunity to give this talk to you, and I guess we are happy to share ideas and to answer questions.
Okay, there's one question about the chance to recycle a bioplastic. To be honest, I don't know. I'm not an expert in biochemicals. The thing is that I added these bioplastics to this presentation because this is something that we have often talked with Alex Berg, the director of UDT in Concepcion, because they, of course, they argue that in the long term, biomass should be used for material uses like bioplastics or chemicals to a high extent. my PhD thesis, on the other hand, is about bioenergy. So I'm not an expert regarding bioplastics. So, and of course they are right that something like pure wood, which has a high quality, it's a little bit of a pity to just use it to produce electricity, just for heating or for electricity. And because I agree with that, I wanted to add the bioplastics. But it is of course true that many of those bioplastics are not very well recyclable. And also I think that recycling right now in Chile is very limited as far as I can see. Like the recollection systems like in Germany, they are not in place. And as long as you do not have the logistical systems, it doesn't matter that much how well you can recycle a bottle or a container.
Tobías, what you showed is exactly the problem we have with Tetra Pak. You have a perfect combination between plastic, wood, and aluminum, and that is crazy. It's very difficult to take it apart again. So you are creating the same problem we have with all these one-way packages, because sticky polyethylene, polyethylene in this case on wood or carton in this case, and aluminum, it's really tough to separate. So on that side, one important part is that you were saying to use hydrogen, of course, to make biofuels. The problem in energy is that if you use hydrogen directly on a fuel cell, you have 55% electricity. If you use that same biofuel in a generator, you have 20, 30. So it's a terrible waste of energy because of internal combustion engines are as bad as they were 100 years ago. When Mr. Otto and Mr. Diesel involved that, you have some turbo, but you go from, I don't know, 18 to 20% efficiency between the chemical energy that you have and the mechanical energy that you have for a vehicle. So I don't know if it's at the future, but I agree with you that you don't have to change the motor. You can use exactly the same damn 100 years old technology to try to get you further. So that's not so easy. If you think about energy, you have to see how good we use the energy at the end of the day.
Yeah, this is true. And this is also why, like, there's a general consensus among most studies that electrified solutions are in most cases more efficient. And these biofuels, for instance, also produced with the addition of hydrogen, they could be used for cases which are very hard to electrify. For instance, aviation, or in some cases, maritime shipping. And in many cases in Chile, in the mining sector, the idea is just to use hydrogen, which would work best in most cases. But the thing is that what you have seen is that the biomass potential is very limited in general. For instance, there would not be enough biomass to produce more than 10% of the electricity in Chile. So even if there would be only a very limited share of biomass in transportation, or for instance, other types of shipping, that would be enough to use most of the biomass in Chile. So that would be enough to, for instance, provide a profitable utilization path for the forest industry or for farmers which want to use cereal straw.
Okay, we have more questions.
Mm-hmm.
So Eduardo Cienfuegos from Chile also is asking you what are the sustainability aspects considered in your analysis of biomass energy in Chile?
Oh, now there are many sustainability aspects that have to be taken into consideration regarding the use of biomass. And I do not want to, exaggerate.
I asked a question, maybe I can make it a little simple. Maybe if you can just refer to the social aspects you considered, that are the most interesting for me, if that's possible.
Oh, the thing is that these social aspects, they are very hard to quantify in many cases. So for instance, in what I'm doing in my PhD thesis, social aspects, they are they only comprise two aspects. One is employment effects in different regions, and the other one are effects on prices. What I said is that, for instance, if you wanted to build a huge biorefinery, something that would be bad from a social perspective would be to increase the feedstock price in the firewood market for people who rely on firewood for heating. There are, of course, many more aspects, social aspects. And for instance, there was another PhD thesis at the IIP from a colleague. She already completed a PhD thesis, and she was analyzing the local acceptance of huge energy projects in Chile and in other countries. So how does the population react to, for instance, a new wind farm or to a biomass power plant? That would be another aspect. And there are a lot of good articles about cultural aspects of firewood use in Chile, also involving surveys. But the thing is that I do not go into detail too much in this area, because I mean, I have been in Chile for several months, but these types of investigations, they require a lot more of insight from staying longer actually at where this is happening. So what we are doing at our institute is focusing more on things that are easy to quantify, like carbon dioxide emissions, or things like employment effects.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
I'm sorry to take another 30 seconds from the time of everybody, but in my dissertation, I addressed a similar topic, and I also consider sustainability aspects. Maybe we can discuss some I used also in Chile. My work was with the Comasa power plant. That's only electricity, and so the assessment was also a little harder on the side of efficiency. But maybe, for example, reduced open fires with straw, it's something that's very important and also easy to measure, and also street waste regarding to straw transport was also a thing that was important to them and others. But thank you, and sorry for the extra introduction.
No, thank you very much. I was going to ask about this. So what your thesis was about. And this is also very interesting, because during this project, Semo Bioenergy, we actually had the opportunity to visit this Comasa plant. So I already saw this once, and this is very interesting. And I'm going to definitely look up your thesis. Okay, there are more questions, right?
Yes, two more, I think, but probably Angelo, I don't know, where are you now? Because he has like two parts of the same question. Maybe it's easier to talk about that or to ask you directly. Angelo?
And I also see the question. This is the future solar capacity in the north capable of replacing 100% of residential heating, right? That would be the next question.
Yes, yeah, that's the, yes, I'm based in Chile. Okay. Yeah, that's my question. It's a solar power in Chile. The north of Chile could be capable of replacing, or how much percentage of the energy consumption made in the south of Chile could be made 100% or 80%.
I can help you with the answer. It's 5,000%.
Oh,
5,000%. The renewable energy in Chile is about 50 to 70 times the installed electrical capacity. So we have a surplus of 50 Chiles. So we can do whatever we want with renewable energy. I mean, it's crazy, but it's 50. There are two studies. One is from the KIT, Gesellschaft Internationale Zusammenarbeit. They got the factor 75 times more potential than what we use today, and the government had a number of 50. but we don't have to argue about that. It's many, many times more than all the electricity we have today, electricity. And please do not confuse electricity with energy. Electricity is only 22% of the energy used in Chile. So don't confuse that, because the electrical industry tends to make this confusion. They say we are now renewable. Bullshit, we are importing $8 billion every year in fossil combustions. So that's a lot of money that we're wasting every year instead of using renewables. So that is a very important part. And Tobías, just one compliment. Bernardo was true in asking about the social aspect. In using firewood, we have a tremendous social problem. Just an example, it would be, I have very good friends that know that you have to use very dry pellets. So they exchange in Temuco, where Christian is, the oven for their mother. Mother is 90 years old. She has never used the pellet oven. She uses her stove with the wood, because it's a custom, because it's nice. You have a home. The home is the stove. Everybody's around that stove. Yeah, that is a hot chamber in a home. So it's very difficult to teach people not to kill the neighbors. And I tell you, kill the neighbors. We have between 3,500 and 5,000 deaths a year, and nobody cares. Now we are very complicated with COVID and whatsoever, but nobody cares about the 3,000 deaths we have because of fine particles, PM 2.5. So it's a very important part that you are talking. I agree with you. Watch out, because they are, as usual, there are deaths that nobody cares, and the other one in the newspapers, and those are the ones we are following now. But it's a social problem. That's why Bernardo had completely right to ask. It's not only numbers; it's also people that die because of bad use of this energy. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And I wanted to add something to the solar potential in the north. This is completely right that regarding the potential, it would be easily possible to replace all energy use in Chile with renewable energy. The thing is that regarding the electrification, the government has a plan in the carbon exit plan until 2050 to have electric heating in, I think, 80% of the apartments and 57% of the houses. So that would not be 100%, and this would not be because the potential would not be there, but the problem is more like retrofitting the houses. In some cases, it would be difficult to replace the heating system, or they just assume that people would not want that electrified solution. So,
Tobías, the problem is that we have a political problem. We do have a Ministry of Electricity, and we would like to have a Ministry of Energy. That's real truth. We have a Ministry of Electricity. They only care about the big companies and whatsoever, and the rest doesn't exist, which is a problem. We want to change that with hydrogen, just for things that you cannot electrify. That is our main work on that. And the biomass is very important in that too, because it's a custom, people. It's so lousy to have a electrical heater compared with your flames and the firework. It's a completely different thing. So people will stick to their cheap firewood. And one of the major issues, it's not engineering, the firewood is sold by weight. So you weigh. So if you have water, it's more money. So you never try it, because otherwise you price it. So I think so simple, like change the pricing by volume and not by weight. So they are selling you water. But of course you are killing neighbors, but that's another problem.
Very good point. Maybe I can step in here for a second. Very good point, Mr. Platt. And I think that was also something we investigated, or we made a little bit of a survey in Chile, which was done by, Tobías Zimmer mentioned it, by Kira Schumacher. This was all about this acceptance. It's not only about efficiency or technical issue, but it's also about atmosphere, what you say, though you have your cozy fire, and that's something different, like have an electrical heating. So that's one point. And the other point to the potential I wanted to add is what also Tobías Zimmer mentioned, is you certainly have a kind of a huge potential, but the other question is how to bring the energy or the electricity from A to B. And that's something similar we have in Germany under completely different conditions. We generate a lot of renewable energy from wind. So that's mainly in the northern part of Germany where we have huge potentials in wind, and we generate this renewable energy, but the main industry is in the south, the energy intensive industry. So we have to establish a new grid structure. And also we have resistance in people, you know, so it's not in my backyard problem that people don't want to see the grids. So this has also something to do with, on the one hand side, technical issues, efficiency, but also with acceptance issues. So, yeah.
So we have time for one last question. And Hugo, if you want to talk, or I can read it if, as you wish.
Well, thank you very much. And I would like to thank for the presentation. It was very interesting. Well, the topics you are talking about applies especially in your latitude. In other latitudes, like in Ecuador, Central America, or Brazil, we are talking about something different. And I personally have had in the past experiences in the sugar industry, in the biofuels industry in Brazil. And I see with nostalgia the development in around these places where these biofuels took place, like in Brazil. And I mean, I am in favor to that in other countries which are, we have the potential to do it, to also produce biofuels. But now the question arises. Everybody is talking about e-mobility, electric mobility. Yes, I personally think that we still could easily have some 50 years in order to construct and develop a biofuel facility. I'm talking about ethanol and also biodiesel, not to produce all the fuels we need in Ecuador, for example, but at least 5 to 10% to mix to the gasolines. But people, especially politicians in our country, are blind, because I think in the past someone said the biofuels are competing with food. Yes, and this certainly applies for some regions or some countries, but not for every country. And I just wanted to hear the voice and the experience of the experts. What do they think if they would live in a country which has the potential to grow sugarcane? Would you be in favor of producing biofuels in these days when people are talking about electromobility and you have millions of vehicles which are still moved by combustion motors? That is my question.
So I think that there are many cases also for first generation biofuels. And we did not only have a project with Chile, but we also worked in one international project with a university in Thailand, with the University of Bangkok. And for instance, Thailand is one country which has plans also to expand the production of first generation biofuels, including bioethanol. And this makes a lot of sense for Thailand. And I think that might apply to countries like Brazil as well. This negative view on first generation biofuels or biofuels in general comes from, countries like Chile, which can achieve very low electricity prices in the end, in the long term. So for them, it might not make that much sense. Also, they have very limited areas in agriculture, and Chile has a very export-oriented agriculture. They need their arable land for, I think, more valuable products. But for instance, in Germany, the problem is that we do not have the biomass to produce biofuels. We have a lot of corn, and people are already complaining that it is too much with the production of energy crops like corn or canola. And this is also why in the European Union, there is no consensus on biofuels. For instance, countries like Finland, they believe more strongly also in second generation biofuels. And the European Union, they still have the aim to replace something like 10–12% of the energy in the traffic sector by biofuels. And countries like Finland or other countries in Scandinavia, they are still believing in this. And in Germany, we have a little bit more of a negative view on biofuels. So it really depends on the country. And for, as you said, for some countries which have, for instance, the potential to grow sugarcane, I think that it will make for, I think the next 20–30 years, it will still make sense to produce first generation biofuels. Also for many states in the United States, which have a lot of bioethanol.
Thank you very much.
Okay.